Hello, welcome to Progressive Short Takes. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. What I want to cover tonight is replacing Nancy Pelosi. How would it work? How would it work? Okay, so this all started, with Jimmy Dore coming out, um, less than a week ago, I guess, and but telling people correctly, I think, that the squad had the votes, had a sufficient number of votes to be able to withhold them from Nancy Pelosi, okay, and then to bargain with her for an important concession. And for Jimmy, that concession was to get a floor vote before Medicare for all, which would serve the purpose of making everybody go on record. And we then would know who was really for Medicare for all and who was simply pretending. When you want to determine that, it's not enough to look at the co-sponsors, because both co-sponsors can sign on to bills just for show. They're not really going on record that can be used against them. So Jimmy correctly reasoned, I think, that it was important to get a floor vote and find out where people stood. And it was important also to get the squad to struggle to get a floor vote, because the squad is supposed to be fighting for us. And I think Jimmy was right about all that. But just a couple of days after he called for this, it just seemed to me to be too little. That if they were in a position to block Nancy Pelosi from the speakership, they were also in a position to replace Nancy Pelosi. So I cut, an earlier video, which you will find, at my YouTube site and my Facebook site. If you search for Joseph Firestone, on YouTube, you'll find all manner of videos there, but you will find the original Replace Pelosi video. And you can see why I thought that was such an important thing to do. I have all kinds of statements in there justifying why it would be a good thing to get rid, of Nancy Pelosi. I'm not going to repeat them here, but you can check this out, at YouTube and at my Facebook site. Just search for Joseph M. Firestone and you'll find my Facebook site, or search for Let's Get It Done and you'll find my Facebook site. Well, there have been some other reactions to Jimmy's video, also calling for more to be done. There was an important post by David Sirota, who also thought that Jimmy was asking for too little. He wanted not only to ask for a floor vote, on Medicare for all, but in addition, he pointed out that the squad could additionally condition their vote for Nancy Pelosi on a commitment that she remove the Medicare for all opponent who chairs the key committee, specifically Richie Neal, notoriously bought by the healthcare industry, who has opposed Medicare for all for ages and who recently has tried to water down surprise billing legislation in the middle of the pandemic. Of course, he is the chair of the Ways, and Means Committee in the House, he's the traffic cop for all bills. Okay, so it would be very important to remove him if we wanted a vote, okay, for Medicare for all. Nancy Pelosi can remove Neal as the panel's chairman. And as David points out, next in line in seniority is Representative Lloyd Doggett, okay, of Texas, who for years was known as the smartest Democrat in the House, the highest IQ Democrat, who is, as David Sirota correctly says, a much more progressive lawmaker. He certainly is. If one wanted to change the power dynamic, which is so important, okay, to the House, that would be a very, very important thing to do. Maybe more important than getting a floor vote, okay, on Medicare for all, because if you got rid of Nancy Pelosi's opposition and you got rid, okay, of Richie Neal's opposition, that would be two big steps towards getting such a floor vote. But of course, as David points out, you could ask for both. You could also schedule a vote on existing legislation to let states create single-payer healthcare systems. And there's some legislation from Ro Khanna empowering the HHS Services Secretary to approve waivers to states that want to create their own Medicare for all programs. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there was a provision for that in the original Affordable Care Act. I'm not sure why that provision isn't sufficiently strong, but to allow providing waivers to states without the new legislation. But certainly, I don't think the new legislation would hurt that. So certainly demand that too. And third, schedule a vote on a resolution demanding Biden use executive authority to expand Medicare. Yeah, that could happen too. And the American Prospect, but Dave Dayen, has reported that thanks to provisions in the Affordable Care Act, and I've live streamed about this also, President Joe Biden will have the unilateral executive authority to expand Medicare coverage during the pandemic. The House can pass a resolution demanding that he immediately take this action. And David says a resolution like this should be a no-brainer. I agree with him. It should be a no-brainer. If the Democrats in the House were really for Medicare for all, that would be a no-brainer. There could also be a provision in year-end spending bills to create a presidential commission charged with crafting a Medicare for all program. There could be this, but I don't see why it's necessary. H.R. 1384, the House bill that's there right now, is currently the gold standard from the viewpoint of Physicians for a National Health program. They have exhaustively studied Medicare for all now for many, many, many years. And they have all kinds of articles on it, all kinds of reasons why H.R. 1384 is a great bill. I've gone over it in detail myself, and I think it's a great bill too. So I'm not sure why this is necessary, but this should be an easy thing for Nancy Pelosi to agree to, because after all, it's a commission. It's a commission. On the other hand, I don't know if I would like to wait for another study commission to craft a program when we already have such a great bill. Well, in a sense, that's neither here nor there. There's a fifth action, but suggested by David Sirota. Author a discharge petition to force a vote on Medicare for all. And again, he's certainly right about that. And he points out that these actions can be taken in addition to a demand for a Medicare for all floor vote. And he's quite right about that too. In addition, these actions can be taken. But there are more demands that could be made in return for appointing a new speaker. For example, a vote on the Green New Deal resolution. For example, a vote on the elimination of student debt. For example, a vote on the Automatic Boost to Communities Act, okay, the Rashida Tlaib Jayapal bill, dealing with a basic income for people for the duration of the COVID crisis and a basic income for them for a year afterwards, the whole thing to be funded by a $2.2 trillion coin. These are good bills. And Jayapal has some good bills too. And there's no reason why they couldn't be part of a demand. However, I don't think such a demand should be made of Nancy Pelosi. I don't think, after all these years of toxic leadership of the Democrats in the House, I do not think we can trust her to keep her word about this. I am for replacing Nancy Pelosi. What I want to do instead is to allow a new leader to emerge from the Democratic Party, from the center of the Democratic Party in the House. Someone like a Rosa DeLauro, a Janice, perhaps a Jan Schakowsky, but perhaps if we can get them, okay, a Karen Bass, okay, or a Barbara Lee, someone who's more in the center and who's built up trust among the members over many, many years. Trust not only on the part of left people, okay, not only on the part of the squad, but also trust among the problem solvers caucus as well. What they should be trusting is that the new leader will be open to all and open to floor votes suggested by all. Someone who listens to all parts of the party and is not simply dismissive of certain parts of the party. It seems to me the problem solvers in the party need this as much as the progressives do, as much as the squad does. I don't believe Nancy Pelosi has been a very open leader. I don't believe she's been a very democratic leader. I think she's been a hierarchical leader, a top-down leader. Her crafting of the CARES Act was a travesty. So I think the squad ought to use its leverage in order to replace Pelosi. No ifs, ands, okay, or buts. Okay, I want to remind everybody, okay, at this time, that I'm going to have a more freewheeling live stream tonight at 9 p.m. on my YouTube channel. Just search for Joseph Firestone, okay, and you'll find it. And that one is going to be much more of okay, it's going to be primarily a Q&A video um, 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 to answer questions. But I want to go further, okay, with this video now and consider how things would work. Okay. So let me share the screen for you and bring up a little graphic that will hopefully clear up things for many of you. Here it is. Let me give the whole screen to the graphic. So here are some assumptions about how the vote would go, not counting the squad, okay, and assuming the Democrats would have 222 votes in the House. I'm assuming 214 would be locked in for Nancy Pelosi. 213 would be locked in for by Kevin McCarthy, okay, who is the minority leader, okay, of the Republicans. Okay. I'm also assuming there would be 8 squad votes that would be up for grabs, okay. Since the 8 squad votes would not be going to Pelosi, one possible scenario is that she would get 214 votes to Kevin McCarthy's 213 votes. Now let's assume that 8 members of the squad are absent, that they're not there for the quorum, okay, to elect a speaker. They sit it out. They do not vote. All 8 do not vote. Then Speaker Pelosi would have a majority. She would become the new speaker. New speaker, same as the old speaker. 214 votes for Nancy Pelosi. 213 votes that are non-Pelosi votes. In this case, all for Kevin McCarthy. And so Pelosi wins in that particular scenario. But there are some other scenarios that I want to quickly check in with. Okay, it's possible for members of the House to vote present. When they do record a present vote, that means they are part of the quorum. And instead of the quorum having 427 votes, if a single squad member were to be present and vote present, and the other 7 squad members would still stay out of it, there would be 428 total quorum votes. And the Pelosi votes and the non-Pelosi votes would be tied at 214. No one would have a majority, since according to House rules, winning the speakership requires a majority of the quorum votes. That means Speaker Pelosi would be blocked. She would be blocked. She would not be reelected as Speaker on the first ballot, if that were the condition on the first ballot. That's not the only option, though. There could be 2 present votes and 6 absent votes. That would mean the non-Pelosi votes would have a majority. They would be 215, and the Pelosi votes would be at 14. It's important to note that since none of the squad votes would be going to Kevin McCarthy, his votes would still remain at 213. There would be 213 McCarthy votes and 2 present votes that would be making up the 215 votes. The non-Pelosi votes would have a majority, so she would still be blocked. Well, let's go down the other rows of the table then. There could be 3 squad votes that were present and 5 absent. In that case, the non-Pelosi majority would be 216 to 214. Or there could be 4 votes. That makes it 217 to 214. Or 5, 218 to 214, and so on. If all eight of the expanded squad were to come and vote present, That would mean there would be a quorum of 435 votes, and the votes in that quorum would be 221 non-Pelosi votes and 214 votes for Pelosi. When there's a quorum, it takes 218 votes to have a majority. So, okay, it even happens that 3 of the squad could actually decide that they wanted to vote for Pelosi, and she would still only have 217 votes. She would still be blocked. So only 5 of the squad votes would be necessary to block her, even in the scenario where all 435 people are there before the quorum. Okay, it's important, therefore, to make that point. If the non-Pelosi votes are 200, okay, and 18, then that will always serve to block Nancy Pelosi from getting reelected. Now, that's true in every scenario involving 432 or more House members actually voting in the quorum. As long as there are 5 of them who are voting present, then the non-Pelosi votes would get to 218, and the Pelosi votes would be less. It's important here to note, okay, a further assumption that absent members don't count, but towards a quorum. So you have to keep that in mind. So that's how it works if any of these particular scenarios apply to the first ballot. Now, what happens if there's no selection of a speaker on the first ballot? Then there's a second ballot. There could be a third ballot. There could be a fourth ballot. Okay. In the history of the House, there have been as many as 129 ballots before a selection was made. However, this is modern times. There are media. There's TV. There are going to be people observing this. And the House, from a PR point of view, is going to look absolutely terrible if they cannot resolve this, okay, in a relatively few number, okay, of ballots. I don't know what that number of ballots is. It might be 5 ballots. It might be 6 ballots. The key here is that the squad members, 5 or more squad members, have to resist the horrendous pressure they're going to get to vote for Pelosi, to break the stalemate. They'll be offered all kinds of inducements to break the stalemate. But if they stand firm, I believe along about the 5th ballot or the 6th ballot or something like that, Nancy Pelosi is going to have to retire from the field and give someone else in the Democratic Party a chance to get the 218 votes that are needed for the speakership of the House. I don't know who's going to step forward. It might even be something Nancy Pelosi feels very, very comfortable with. All I do know is that sooner or later, and I expect in a relatively few ballots, we ain't going to 59 ballots here. We ain't going to 129 ballots. We're not going to 25 ballots. We're going to go with a relatively few number of ballots where this trial only lasts for a total of a single day. It's not going to go over one day. They're not going to want to look that silly. They're going to want to elect someone who has the majority support of the whole caucus. So consensus candidates are going to emerge. What I'm really calling for is an end to Pelosi being a consensus candidate. That is what I'm calling for. I think she has been toxic. She opposed Medicare for all. She even set up a public option for failure in 2009 and 2010. She allowed an Affordable Care Act that was a giveaway to the insurance companies and that left, what was it, 20 million people uncovered, growing to 30 million people uncovered over a period of time, with constantly increasing premiums, very unpopular with many, many people, leaving it vulnerable to continuous attacks by the Republican Party. And that whole management of the healthcare reform in 2009 and 2010 that she and Obama collaborated on, that created a situation where the Democrats got hosed in 2010 and got exposed to the gerrymander and got exposed to Republican takeover of both the House and then the Senate. All that was under Pelosi's leadership. She wasn't the only one to blame, of course. There was Obama and his fine feathered friends and his administration too. But we have to recognize Pelosi was a failure then. She was not a success. She was a failure. Most of the squad people are fairly new to politics. They don't remember how Pelosi screwed up in 2009, 2010, or they blame it on somebody else. They have much more tolerance for her than I have because they don't have the experience of fighting these battles in 2009, 2010, 2011, the ridiculous fiscal cliff. All this was terrible, and it was facilitated by Pelosi and her pay-go and her wish for austerity. Austerity, sorry. Not austerity, austerity. She performed during this period of time terribly. And she lost the House. Unforgivably, she lost the House. She had a huge majority. She lost the House because the House didn't pass the right bills. And because they always went along with the idea that something was better than nothing. Something is not always better than nothing. The Affordable Care Act was worse than nothing. If it had not been passed in 2010 as a result of Republican opposition and conservative opposition, then the 2010 election could have been about that. It could have been about getting a big enough majority to pass a Medicare for All bill that would have gone into effect inside of a year. H.R. 676 was around then. It could have been gotten inside of a single year instead of waiting around till 2014 for the ACA to finally be operative. And when it was finally operative, things didn't work. And they left millions and millions and millions of people uncovered. 4 years were wasted there. In those 4 years, certainly certainly the pressure would have built up sufficiently that with proper leadership in the House, we could have gotten the House fully in back of the Medicare for All bill. I'll never forgive Nancy Pelosi for how she led the House back then. Okay, let me address some questions, okay, which have arisen. I'll share another screen with you. Here are some questions, okay, which have arisen after the first video. What day is the vote going to take place? The answer, January 3rd, 2021. Is it public? Yes. Should be on C-SPAN, but that depends on the House, whether the House wants to make it available for C-SPAN. Are 5 votes needed to block Pelosi? That depends on the various assumptions. See the previous table. What if another unsatisfactory choice is nominated? What is the plan? Same plan. Rinse and repeat until the right choice is considered. What is the right choice? Someone willing to make firm promises to the progressives that certain things will be done, like the things David Sirota wants to get done, like the bills, okay, that I mentioned. Certainly a Medicare for All floor vote. In other words, a Medicare for All vote plus much, much more, including good committee assignments for all the squad, including the replacement of committee chairs who are opposed, not neutral, but opposed and obstructive of progressive priorities in the House, such as the Green New Deal. So the plan is to rinse and repeat until a choice like that comes up. I've mentioned some possible choices that would be friendly to progressive priorities. That's very important. Are newly elected members allowed to vote? Yes, they are. What if the effort to replace Pelosi fails? Then squad people are going to get lousy committee assignments. They're going to be banished to congressional Siberia. I mean, that's what's going to happen. Of course, they're not getting any financial support from the DCCC now. So it's not as if that would be taken away from them. So it's primarily going to be lousy committee assignments. Probably the centrists in the party will try to primary the squad. But they tried that in the last election. AOC was primaried. Rashida Tlaib was primaried. Ilhan Omar was primaried. I think the only one of them who wasn't, okay, was Ayanna Pressley, as I recall. So in those primaries, their opponents were very well funded. Guess what? The squad blew them out of the water anyway. Why did they actually blow them out of the water? Because the squad people were perceived as people who fight for the people. And what they're doing now? If they try to replace Pelosi, their brand as people who fight for the people would be further enhanced. What is the hashtag for this effort on Twitter? It's hashtag replace Pelosi. How can we avoid Kevin McCarthy getting elected? Just keep Nancy Pelosi at more than 213 votes, because the most votes Kevin McCarthy will ever get in the contest is 213 votes. He's never going to get any more. That's the Republican votes. If you make sure Nancy Pelosi is kept at 214 votes, there's no chance that Kevin McCarthy would be able to slip in. What's the difference between this proposal and Jimmy Dore's? If this is successful, you can get multiple floor votes, changes in procedural rules, like the pay-go rule, the terrible pay-go rule, which has shackled progressive legislation in the House for years and years and years, would be gone. And we might get new procedures for bringing votes to the floor so that the speaker would not be in such total control. We need procedural rules that prevent a speaker from taking the kind of control that Nancy Pelosi took during the time of the CARES Act, which she basically legislated and compromised with Mitch as she wanted. You wonder why you don't have a relief bill today? It's because Nancy Pelosi gave away her leverage in the CARES Act. And when it was pointed out to her after the CARES Act, she got huffy and BS'd all over the place about how she was going to get great help for state and local. Where is the state and local help now, Nancy? Where is it? It is nowhere. The state and local governments are laying off people right and left because Nancy screwed up in the CARES Act. Why did she screw up? In part because she didn't consult with the progressives. She didn't consult with almost anybody else. And she didn't carefully read that bill to see what was in that bill. I'll bet money she had no idea that the $500 billion that she was allocating to help for business, that $454 billion of that was going to be used to create a $4.54 trillion money cannon at the Fed. I don't think she understood that in that bill. I don't think she understood that because I don't think she understands financial stuff. That's one of the worst things about her. She doesn't really know how government finance works. She thinks it works like her household budget. That's one of the biggest problems with her, one of the biggest reasons why she should go. Anyway, next advantage I've covered already is better committee assignments. But then finally, the most important thing, as well as a speaker who doesn't dismiss progressives, who doesn't dismiss the squad, who's going to take the squad seriously as the future of the party, which is what it is. We need a speaker who is open to the transition so that the Democratic Party once again becomes the party of FDR, recognizably. That is what we want with a Green New Deal. Very much as that Green New Deal was defined by Bernie effing Sanders in his agenda, in his platform, on his website, not the pale thing that Biden is crafting now. Anyway, that's all for this progressive short take. I'll be back at 9 o'clock tonight. I guess this wasn't that short. Well, I apologize. I'll see you then. Thanks for coming. That'll be a Q&A.